The sun had barely peeked over the horizon when Amara woke up in her tiny room in Lagos, Nigeria. The old rooster next door, whom she had named Kokoro, was already announcing the dawn with his usual crow. She quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her grandmother who slept in the room next door. Their small house might not have been much, but to Amara, it was filled with love and warmth. Every morning, Amara followed the same routine she had perfected over the past 5 years, ever since she turned 15 and had to leave school to help support her family. She would wash her face with cool water from the bucket outside, say her morning prayers, and then begin the important task of preparing her groundnuts for the day. The process of making her special groundnuts was like a dance she knew by heart. First, she would sort through the raw groundnuts, picking out only the best ones. Then she would wash them carefully and add just the right amount of salt, not too much, not too little. The roasting was the most important part. Amara had learned from her mother, before she passed away, that the secret to perfect groundnuts was in the timing. Too long on the fire, and they would burn. Too little, and they would be raw inside. As she worked, Amara would sing softly, songs her mother had taught her, songs about hope and love and the beauty of life. Her voice would float through the early morning air, mixing with the sounds of the neighborhood coming to life. Women sweeping their compounds, children getting ready for school, and the distant honking of early morning traffic. By 6 o'clock, her wooden tray would be filled with perfectly roasted groundnuts, arranged in neat little piles. She would carefully wrap her grandmother's medications in a clean handkerchief and put them in her pocket, along with the money she had saved for emergencies. Then, balancing the heavy tray on her head with practiced ease, she would begin her walk to the busy Balogun market. The market was Amara's second home. She knew every corner, every shop owner, and every regular customer. There was Mama Bisi who sold colorful fabrics, Uncle Tunde who fixed broken electronics, and Sister Joy who braided hair. They were all part of her daily life, her market family who looked out for her just as she looked out for them. What no one knew was that Amara carried a dream in her heart as big as the Lagos sky. Every night, after counting her day's earnings and making sure her grandmother had taken her medicine, she would pull out her old school books from under her bed. By the light of a small kerosene lamp, she would study, teaching herself everything she could. She dreamed of becoming a doctor someday, of healing people like her grandmother who suffered from various illnesses but couldn't afford proper medical care. What do you think kept Amara motivated to study even after such long, tiring days at the market? It was on an unusually hot afternoon in April 2023 when destiny decided to change Amara's life forever. The sun was beating down mercilessly on the marketplace, and she had just finished serving a customer when she heard the sound of an expensive car approaching. In the busy market, where most people walked or rode Okadas, motorcycles, the sight of a sleek black Mercedes-Benz S-Class was enough to make heads turn. The car moved slowly through the narrow market street, carefully avoiding the displays of goods that spilled onto the road. When it finally came to a stop near Amora's usual spot, the tinted window rolled down, revealing a face that she would later come to know better than her own, Chief Oluwaseun Adebayo, though at that moment, he was just another customer to her. Saun, as his friends called him, hadn't planned to stop at the market that day. He was on his way to an important board meeting when the familiar smell of roasted groundnuts wafted through his car's air conditioning system. The scent transported him back to his childhood, to memories of his late mother buying him groundnuts after school. Something made him tell his driver to stop. When he stepped out of the car, wearing a perfectly tailored blue suit that probably cost more than what Amara earned in a year, the market seemed to pause for a moment. Here was a man who clearly belonged in the glossy office buildings of Victoria Island, not in the bustling streets of Balogun Market. But when he approached Amara's tray, there was no arrogance in his manner. His eyes were kind, and his smile was genuine as he asked, "How much for your groundnuts?" Amara, who usually had no trouble speaking to customers, found herself stammering slightly. "For 500 naira per cup, sir," she managed to say, her eyes meeting his briefly before looking down at her tray. What happened next would become a story that the market women would tell for years to come. Saun looked at the tray full of groundnuts, then back at Amara's face, and said, "I'll take all of them." Amara thought she had misheard him. All of them, sir." "Yes, all of them," he confirmed with a warm smile. "My employees at the office love groundnuts, and yours smell particularly delicious." As Amara began to package all her groundnuts into several bags, her hands trembling slightly, Sawn asked her name and how long she had been selling in the market. There was something about her that intrigued him. Perhaps it was the way she carried herself with quiet dignity, or maybe it was the intelligence he saw in her eyes when she finally looked up at him. That evening, after Sawn had left with all her groundnuts, paying far more than she had asked for, Amara couldn't stop thinking about him. It wasn't just because he was handsome or wealthy. There was a kindness in his eyes that had touched her heart. The next morning, Amara took extra care with her groundnuts. She told herself it was just because she wanted to maintain her reputation for quality, but deep down, she hoped the mysterious man in the nice suit would return. And return he did. Day after day, Sawn would appear at her spot in the market, sometimes in different luxury cars but always with the same kind smile. He would buy groundnuts and stay to talk with her, asking about her life, her dreams, and her grandmother. He told her about his own life too, how he had built his technology company from scratch, how he missed his parents who had passed away, and how lonely success could sometimes be. Their daily meetings became the highlight of both their lives. Sawn started coming earlier and earlier to the market, sometimes arriving just as Amara was setting up her tray for the day. He loved watching how she arranged her groundnuts in perfect spirals, how she greeted each customer with genuine warmth, and how she remembered everyone's preferences. Which ones liked their groundnuts extra salty, which ones preferred them barely salted at all. One morning, Sawn arrived to find Amara teaching a young girl how to count change. The child was probably no more than 7, sent by her mother to buy groundnuts. Instead of rushing the transaction, Amara patiently helped the little girl count the money 3 times, praising her efforts. When the girl finally got it right, Amara gave her an extra scoop of groundnuts as a reward. "You'd make a wonderful teacher," Sawn said after the girl left. Amara shook her head, smiling. "A doctor," she corrected him. "That's my dream. To help people heal." It was moments like these that made Sawn realize he was falling deeply in love with her. He found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone else, about the pressure of running his companies, his fears of disappointing people, and how lonely success could be. Their daily conversations grew longer. Sawn started bringing 2 chairs so they could sit together during quiet moments at the market. He learned that Amara loved reading medical journals she borrowed from a nearby library. She learned that despite his wealth, Sawn still enjoyed fixing broken electronics himself, a hobby from his younger days. The market women watched their blooming romance with approval. Mama Bisi, the fabric seller, would often say, "See how he looks at her. That's not the way a rich man looks at a poor girl he's playing with. That's real love." Their first official date at the Golden Spoon was just the beginning. Sawn planned each subsequent date to help Amara explore her interests. When she mentioned she'd always wanted to understand how hospitals worked, he arranged a private tour of Lagos's best medical facility. When she talked about her love for traditional healing herbs, he took her to a botanical garden where they spent hours learning about medicinal plants. But it was their simple moments that meant the most. They would sit on the beach at sunset, sharing a bag of her groundnuts, talking about everything and nothing. Sawn taught her to drive in an empty parking lot on Sunday afternoons, both of them laughing as she stalled his expensive car again and again. Amara showed him how to haggle in the market, something his wealth had never required him to learn. One memorable evening, Amara invited Sawn to her tiny home for dinner. She was nervous about him seeing where she lived, but Sawn was honored by her trust. He sat on their worn couch, eating jollof rice that she and her grandmother had prepared, and felt more at home than he ever had in his massive mansion. That night, Amara's grandmother took Sawn aside and showed him Amara's secret. Under her bed were stacks of medical textbooks, some held together with tape, all thoroughly read and highlighted. Every night, her grandmother said, no matter how tired she is from the market, she studies. My girl has iron in her soul. Their love grew deeper with each passing day. Sawn found himself looking for excuses to visit the market multiple times a day. He would bring her fresh fruits, bottles of water, or sometimes just stop by to make sure she was taking breaks in the hot sun. Amara started keeping a special batch of groundnuts aside just for him, roasted exactly the way he liked them. The other market vendors became invested in their romance. Uncle Tunde, the electronics repairman, would save interesting medical articles from newspapers for Amara to read. Sister Joy, the hairbraider, insisted on doing Amara's hair for free before each of her dates with Sawn. Even the market children would run to tell Amara whenever they spotted Sawn's car approaching. On July 1, 2023, Sawn surprised Amara with two gifts that changed her life. First, he had arranged for her grandmother to receive treatment at the best hospital in Lagos, covering all the expenses. Second, he had enrolled Amara in a special adult education program that would allow her to complete her education and pursue her dream of medical school. Amara cried tears of joy that day, but she made Sawn promise one thing, that she could continue selling her groundnuts in the market, at least part-time. "It's part of who I am," she explained, and Sawn understood. Their love story became the talk of Lagos. Newspapers wrote about the billionaire and the groundnut seller, calling it a modern-day fairy tale. But to Amara and Sawn, it wasn't about rich or poor, it was simply about two hearts that had found each other. However, fate had other plans. In early August, Amara began to feel unusually tired. At first, she blamed it on her busy schedule, studying, selling groundnuts, and spending time with Sawn. But then came the headaches, terrible ones that made her vision blur. She tried to hide her discomfort, not wanting to worry anyone. But Sawn noticed how she would wince in pain when she thought no one was looking. One day, while serving a customer, Amara suddenly felt dizzy and almost fell. Sawn, who had been visiting her at the market, caught her just in time. That was when he insisted on taking her to the hospital, and no amount of protest from Amara could change his mind. The doctors at St. Nicholas Hospital ran numerous tests. On August 15, 2023, they received the devastating news. Amara had acute myeloid leukemia, an aggressive form of blood cancer. The disease was already in an advanced stage, and her chances of survival were slim. Sawn refused to accept this verdict. He contacted the best cancer specialists from around the world, from London, New York, Dubai, and India. He spent millions of naira on treatments, experimental therapies, and medications. He even had a special medical team set up in their home so Amara could be comfortable. Through it all, Amara's spirit remained unbroken. On days when she felt stronger, she would still go to the market to sell her groundnuts, now accompanied by a nurse. Her customers, who had become like family over the years, would buy her groundnuts and pray for her recovery. Many of them cried when they saw how thin she had become, but Amara would always smile and say, "Don't cry for me. I have lived more love in these few months than many people experience in a lifetime." Sawn was amazed by her strength. Even on her worst days, when the pain was almost unbearable, she would ask about his day and insist on hearing about his work. She would make plans for the future, talking about the medical clinic she wanted to open for poor people once she got better, even though they both knew those plans might never come true. On September 30, 2023, when the doctors told Sawn that Amara might not have much time left, he decided to fulfill one last dream. He transformed her hospital room into a garden of roses, her favorite flower. With the help of the hospital staff, he arranged for soft music to play, and he brought a special batch of groundnuts that they roasted together in a small electric roaster he had brought to her room. Then, in front of her grandmother, their closest friends, and some of the market women who had become like family, Sawn got down on one knee. "Amara," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you have taught me what true love means. Will you marry me?" Through her tears, Amara smiled and whispered, "Yes." They were married right there in the hospital on October 5, 2023. Amara wore a beautiful white dress that had been specially designed to accommodate her medical equipment. Her grandmother, who had grown stronger thanks to her treatments, sat beside her bed, beaming with pride and joy tinged with sadness. The ceremony was small but beautiful. The hospital chapel had been decorated with flowers, and the market women sang traditional songs. Amara's regular customers came bearing gifts of groundnuts, each package wrapped in colorful paper. Even some of the hospital staff who had been caring for her joined the celebration. For a few precious weeks, they lived as husband and wife. Sawn would spend every night in the hospital room, holding Amara's hand as they watched movies or as he read to her from her medical textbooks. They would talk about the future, not the distant one they knew they wouldn't have, but the immediate future, making each day count. On October 26, 2023, Amara woke up feeling unusually peaceful. She asked Sawn to open the window so she could feel the morning breeze. As the sun rose over Lagos, painting the sky in beautiful shades of pink and orange, she turned to him and said, "Thank you for making all my dreams come true." Those were her last words. She passed away quietly, with a gentle smile on her face, as if she was just drifting off to sleep. The news of Amara's death spread through Lagos like a wave of sorrow. The market closed for a day in her honor, something that had never happened before. Thousands of people attended her funeral, from market women to business executives who had heard their love story. Sawn was devastated, but he knew he had to honor Amara's memory in a way that would make her proud. He established the Amara Foundation, which built a state-of-the-art medical school and hospital specifically for underprivileged students who dreamed of becoming doctors. The hospital provides free treatment to poor patients, especially those with cancer. Every year on Amara's birthday, the foundation organizes a groundnut festival in Balogun Market, where free groundnuts are distributed to everyone. The festival also raises money for cancer research and provides scholarships to young people who want to study medicine. In the market today, there's a small monument where Amara used to sell her groundnuts. It's a simple bronze statue of a young woman with a tray of groundnuts on her head, and at its base is inscribed, "Love knows no boundaries." In memory of Amara, who taught us that true wealth lies not in our pockets, but in our hearts. Sawn never remarried. He continues to run his companies and the foundation, but every morning he still visits the market to buy groundnuts from the spot where he first met Amara. People say that sometimes, early in the morning, they can still hear a sweet voice calling out, "Fresh groundnuts. Sweet and hot groundnuts." What lessons about love, life, and death did Amara and Sawn's story teach you? Share your thoughts about how their story touched your heart.